here. 6:18.
Secretary, we do not.
Maybe they're not always.
All right, I think we will call to order this regular meeting of the Easton Board of Education on Tuesday, February 8th, 2022 at 7:30 p.m. Members in attendance: Jeff Parker, Jenny Cheetah, Randy Hicks, Devin Weibel joining us by way of Zoom. I believe Jen DeJesus is going to also be joining us via Zoom. And then obviously I'm here as well, Matt Stinson. We're also joined by esteemed members of our central office staff as well as building leaders in the room. First item, and I think this is Dr. McKinnon joining. I think he can give a presentation later. Here. First item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Reviewing, and before I get to that, I'm actually just going to make sure to let in Jen DeJesus, who's joining us at 7 by way of Zoom as well. Jen joins us just in time. Hi, Jen. Jen joins us just in time for the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, just to remind everyone, the consent agenda is essentially this is not a sort of a majority rule vote. This is, we keep voting, we keep sort of reviewing this section until we all agree. And for our purposes here, it's to review and approve the meeting minutes from the November 9th, 6:30 p.m. special meeting, the November 9th Easton regular meeting minutes, the January 6th Easton Reading Region 9 Joint Board of Education regular meeting minutes, the January 11th, 2022 Easton Board of Education regular meeting minutes, as well as the January 22nd, 2022 Easton Board of Education budget presentation regular meeting. So at this time, I will look for any corrections to any of the meeting minutes that I have listed here.
I had a comment. The regular meeting, November 9th, page 3 at the bottom, there's a paragraph there, discussion possible action. About 6 or 7 lines down, it starts off a thorough review of use of federal grant money, et cetera, et cetera. Superintendent's budget is due to the BOEs maybe later this year. More time for the superintendent's budget to as vote. It looks like maybe it was just dictated as opposed to typed. So I think I understand the meaning of it, but just want to bring that to attention.
Would you seek any corrections at this time, or we have the authority to correct there if we wanted to?
I might take some words out and change some words. So yeah, probably make a correction. Just I think the intent was that the superintendent's budget is due to the BOEs later this year, and therefore more time for the superintendents to review the budget. I'm not really sure, but can't do it on the fly. But do we need to do it on the fly? We need to change it on the fly here.
Unless we want to bring it, we can bring it forward to the next meeting to finalize those corrections, or we can leave as it's either way.
That's fine. Leave it as is.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. Right. Any additional notes or corrections? Hearing no objections, we'll consider our set of meeting minutes to be approved. That will move us to item number 3, public comment. For anyone making public comment, please remember to state your name, your street and town. Please make sure to keep items relevant to the educational interests of the town, and please be civil. Thank you. Any public comments at this point? Please, if you can press it. Sure. Someone got it.
Lou DPHR 48 Drive, board members.
I'm sorry, if you could just go slower, we want to make sure that we get your name down.
Oh, sure. Lou DPHR 48 Drive. I think Jeff's got it, so
Good.
I just wanted to come out tonight and speak in favor of, I know that the schools in Connecticut, Governor Lamont is offering up a possible end of mask mandate. I just wanted to speak out in favor. I know from seeing a lot of people and discussing with a lot of people on social media, there are a lot of parents in town that are in favor of us doing the same. I know Dr. McKinney issued a statement. I'm just haven't really decided on anything yet, but I have a 4.5-year-old who will be entering the school system in the fall, has been in a daycare school setting, where they don't always mask up as well as they could. But luckily, knock on wood, we've only had 1 or 2 cases of COVID in the entire school over 2 years. So, with all the children in the entire school system that now have the option of being vaccinated and have for quite a while, we have to weigh the risks of that versus, what may be healthy for our children, being able to see their smiling faces and their teachers in a motivated, all the things that go along with young child development. So, I don't speak for anybody in particular, but I know from the scuttlebutt on social media as well, there's a lot of parents in town in favor of this. So I want to come and speak out and hope that we let our children have their faces free and clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Hello, my name is Anthony Pasanetto, 86 Gatebridge Road, Easton. Echoing Lou's statement, I'll keep it brief. First of all, I appreciate all of your time and effort you guys do. I see the late night meetings and kudos. God bless you. You're doing a great job. It's 2 years into this at this point. It's different. We see what's happened now. Most of these children are vaccinated early at this point. We see that even if you are, you can still transmit it. At this point, the governor said so. I believe it's February 28th is the day. I think we move forward. I mean, again, there are so many things that they've missed. I mean, they've gone, it's been hard. It's just a difference. I know it's not the end all be all, but it is a different facet of high school where they're not going. And if they're going to get this disease and spread this disease, it's going to be somewhere else. I mean, quite frankly, we're going to dinner, we're going to friends' houses and stuff like that. So that's it. Really.
Thank you. Yes, and please feel free to come make public comment. I will note you can also say, I'd like to add my voice to the previous statements if you concur. So you don't have to feel obliged to make separate statements.
Hi, my name is Rachel Mazzarelli. I live on 29 Ground Pine Lane. If I could just read my daughter's letter that she sent in, she was too nervous to come here today. Hello, my name is Rihanna and I'm in 5th grade. I want to share, oh God, my eyesight. I want to share how negatively impacted I feel from having to wear a mask. First off, not being able to see my friends or teachers' expressions has made me assume things, which is creating more drama and stress in my already anxious brain. I find it hard to really believe what people are saying, so the only time I feel mildly relaxed at school is at recess or snack. The reason I say mildly is due to the fact that even when we're outside, where the spread of COVID is 0, the recess aides still make it stressful for me. Second is now I get headaches regularly. Third is I feel from the teachers constantly lecturing, I feel stressed from hearing about COVID and the masks regularly. I'm at the point where I'm getting stomach aches and headaches regularly and don't want to be at school anymore. Please let the mask mandate go. So, do I get my time now? I have a question. I'm hoping somebody can answer before I even launch in. I got a little confused by Dr. McKenna's letter. Do you guys make the decision on this?
So the public comment period of these meetings is not meant to be a Q&A. It's a public comment period.
Correct.
And we don't do that. We don't engage that because it's a very, it can become a very dangerous.
Correct.
Remark.
But
So I think we can provide clarity on this later in
Yes.
the meeting. And I think as was clearly stated inside of Dr. McKinnon's letter today, there are a number of pieces of information that are coming down that will be a part of the decision-making process. It will absolutely not happen tonight that any decision.
Right. So on that note, I feel very strongly that I would, as well as some of my fellow Eastonites, would like to know who makes this decision and where that information is being found. I am very, very knowledgeable in this topic. I'm hundreds of hours into reading research. And I think it's really important that decisions are being made on current science and not with any political agenda. So I just wanted to note a couple things. I agree with all of these two gentlemen in regards to children needing to see their faces, and the kids are in crisis right now. Brown University recently conducted a study and showed that there's a 23% drop in children's development and a similar drop in their ability to communicate both verbally and through subtle facial cues. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Children and Adolescent Psychiatry, and the Children's Hospital Association has declared a mental health emergency in children. The Surgeon General has reported that symptoms of depression and anxiety have doubled among young people. So I'm just praying. I know Trumbull just dropped their mask mandate, and I'm not looking for anybody to drop completely, but to give choice to parents that they do what's right for them. I am all for choice, and I know that masks are inhibiting many, many, many children and causing what will be profound issues that we'll have to now deal with. I'm seeing it personally at home. You heard it from my daughter's letter. And so I will ask that we are informed about where this decision is being made, because there are tons of research at this point. Prior to COVID, there was about 143 papers on what masks did, and they do not stop respiratory infection. There have now been 2 studies done during COVID. That's it. That shows there is 0 effect for surgical masks and cloth masks, and the N95 is not far behind that. And we know that the literature has said the N95s, if those are our best masks, they do not reduce the risk of contracting a verified illness. So I will just ask that we can stay together as a community. I know there will be people that won't be happy with what I'm saying, and I'm okay with that. I still have love in my heart for everybody, and thank you all for your time. I appreciate everything that you guys do. I couldn't do it, so thank you.
Thank you.
I did read Brianna's email today, and it's not really I read it, responded.
Thank you, I really appreciate it. She wants to be here.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any additional public comment at this time? Yes.
Hey, Drew Disco, 32 Ridgeline. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Drew Disco, TYSCKA, 32 Ridgeline. Sorry.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
I just want to go on record saying that if the state's done their research and done their due diligence to drop the mask mandate for the kids, then at least the town can give the decision to the parents, to allow the parents to decide what they want to do is best for their kid. With every options that everybody has with vaccinations and masks, let the parents decide what's best for their children. Now it's out of the state's hands. Let's leave it in the parents' hands and go from there.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julia Bassett, 183 Warren Road in Easton. Along the same lines of what Rachel has asked, I know that the letter apparently, I think, I shouldn't say apparently, indicated from you, Dr. McKinnon, that although the choice isn't solely yours, that you would be potentially, because there's no consensus in the town as to what to do going forward, you'll probably rely on other commissions. And I believe it was the Commission of Education and Health and Safety. I can't remember the exact commission. I know that there are so many parents who took the time and courage to send you letters to share with you what their opinion is going forward. I want to make sure that instead of posing this as a question, make sure that those letters get into the hands of those who are going to make the decisions. Those words are very powerful from any parent, from any standpoint. And I want to make sure that they all get heard. And in so doing, I think a lot of the parents potentially didn't copy boards of ed or those other people who might be interested in having that information in order to make a decision because they didn't want their names to be involved. So if you wouldn't mind taking those letters, taking out any of the names, but making sure that all of us, parents and even students who wrote letters, make sure that we have a voice in whatever forum that is decided of who's going to make a decision going forward. I would appreciate that. It's now widely known and undebatable based on scientific data, anecdotal data, and opinions from the government, medical doctors, and scientists that the masks that children are wearing in school do nothing to prevent transmission of COVID virus, much less any other virus or airborne illness. This is now an undisputed fact. We have endured 18 months of experiments of all kinds. We are finally able to say that the masks that our children are wearing are not doing anything medically or scientifically to protect them from becoming ill from COVID, full stop. Now, since it's been proven to not be a viable mitigation strategy to protect each other from transmission, why are we still being forced to wear them? It's a great question. Some of the answers I've heard, and admittedly from our own children, are, and this is from my son, they keep my face warm. Another one is the new designs are a fashion statement. It makes me feel, and at least psychologically, that I'm protecting myself from getting anyone else's germs near my nose and mouth. It was never a thing in the history of the entire world to worry about. When we see others wearing them, we feel a sense of maybe double protection. What's the harm? Well, the harm is gingivitis, halitosis, higher dentist bills, acne skin rashes, difficulty breathing, misinterpreted or uninterpreted facial expressions, depression, feelings of isolation, feelings misunderstood, not being understood, fear that you might be a threat to someone else's livelihood just by breathing, singing, exercising in their space, speech delays, social confusion, difficulty seeing, if anyone is wearing eyeglasses or sunglasses. We all know the list goes on and on. At this point of an endemic, mask wearing should be a choice that every parent gets to make for their child. It is beyond the time to let each individual, parent and child, make their own decisions about how to best protect themselves from disease or harm. Let each of us choose how we want to do what is best for us, especially now that other mitigation strategies are available to help prevent and treat COVID.
Any additional public comments at this time?
Francisco, 32 Ridgeline. I dropped my daughter off at Playtots for the past couple of years, and picking her up from school, I obviously drive past the school, watch the kids outside at recess, and they're playing and whatnot, and pretty much watch the kids during their outdoor activities through this whole pandemic. And it was honestly seeing the progression of it when the kids were out there and they had to be 6 feet apart with their masks on outside. There was no interaction. There was just a lot of like a wet blanket, over all these kids not having fun, being able to do anything. And as of recently, when they're outside, even at whatever it is, that basketball court that's right on the side there, the kids are interacting more and being outside and without a mask. I see. I'm very, in my opinion, very happy they're out there getting fresh air, not wearing masks. But just seeing from the kids going 6 feet apart to not wearing masks and playing basketball and interacting and having a good time and being kids, it speaks volumes just driving by and seeing that every day in my brain. And I just want to go on record again saying that it's out of the state's hands now. Let's take it in the parents' hands. Thank you.
Any additional public comment at this time? Hearing none, we'll go to board member comments. Any board member comment? Any? You want to start us off? I'll check it with Devin and Jen. Devin or Jen, do you have any board member comments at this time?
No, I don't.
I don't either. Thank you, John.
Thank you. I'll just say briefly. Yeah, that's it. So the authority was given by way of policy by, I think, all three boards voted to vest the authority to make these decisions in the superintendent. That authority is given by the boards and could be taken away. I don't see that happening. I think our superintendent is going to make a decision that takes into account the mental health of our students, for sure. And I think the voices that we've heard tonight and that we've heard via emails and letters will be heard as well. I think we'll also make sure that we're making decisions based on the best available scientific research and data that is available at the time, and taking the advice of local health authorities. If the state weighs in on this in other venues, which they may still, that could change things as well. But I think ultimately, we're going to follow the federal law, we're going to follow the state law, and when the decision comes down to us, we're going to do whatever we can possibly do to get back to normal. I think we are very eager to let these kids get back to normal, to take the masks out, to see each other. We are obviously going to be mindful of the spread of disease, which can be a problem, which has been seen in some situations where people are spreading the disease to each other. And we're going to try to make the best possible decisions based on the health data that's available to us. It looks promising now. And that is really good. And I hope that that trend continues. And I hope we're done with this awful disease. I think we all hope that we are done with this awful disease. No one wants to keep these stupid masks on longer than we have to. So that's my comments.
Sure. All right, it's a long one. I warned John ahead of time that it was coming, so please just bear with me. And thank you ahead of time for listening. So just wanted to say hello and begin with a few thank yous. First, I wanted to thank the parents and students that have written to us to share their concerns in recent days and hours. I want to thank Dr. McKinnon for continuing to hold our community together with clear, timely, and thoughtful communication that provides the needed framework for our work and discussions. I want to thank John for the continuous growth and leadership that I see in his work as our chair. And I want to thank our responsive, caring administrators and teachers for continuing to work through the most challenging times with grace and focus on our kids. It's been an overwhelming 24 hours on top of an overwhelming 2 years. I taught my junior health classes today, read parent emails, read recent research, tried to comb through the budget and listened to about an hour of the legislative testimony. And then asked my husband if he could please do Carlisle today. So thank you. To me, masks are just one piece of the educational environment to be considered. I recently sent several questions regarding mitigation strategies and quarantine protocols to John to be forwarded to administration. My thought process in recent weeks has centered around what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Is it working? What data supports our practices? And do our practices aimed at reducing health threats remain less harmful than the threat itself? That thought process is born of my own experience as a teacher in the classroom and from hearing from about the educational and emotional challenges that many of the children in our schools are dealing with. My questions include the following. What is the total number of quarantines in which healthy students that were sent home turned positive during the time of quarantine? How does that compare to the total number of students that have been quarantined? How many children were sent home because they were close contact during an unmasked time? For example, a child that sat next to a student at lunch and was quarantined because of that. How many of those children became quarantine turned positive? Have any faculty become quarantine turned positive after having their class sent home? What spacing practices are other districts using at the elementary and middle school level? What research supports continued use of lunch dividers at HKMS? What is the total number of reported cases in students at SSES and HMS since the holiday break? How many students in the pre-K 4s class that was sent home to quarantine for 10 days turned positive during the time of quarantine? What data supports the number of times hand sanitizer is used per day on children? Can this be reduced, opted out of? What is the plan for a return to regular snack time and cafeteria use? What is the plan for a return to normal spacing and grouping in the classroom? And as of recent days, my last question was, what is the plan or discussion at the state and local level for unmasking the general population? Administrators have shared data with us regarding interventions, special education referrals, and students having trouble regulating their behavior as a result of the lack of typical social and physical interaction that current protocols inhibit. I don't believe anyone here or listening would debate the very real and in many cases debilitating social and emotional cases that exist in our schools as a result of the last 2 years. I sometimes wonder how different the conversation might be if we reported the statistics out to parents regarding reading, math, and social work interventions the same way we report positive COVID cases. Imagine, dear parents and guardians, SSES has been informed that 2 members of our kindergarten community and 2 members of our second grade community were referred for social work support. 2 more members of our first grade community were moved into Tier 1 intervention for reading, and so on and so on. Perhaps then in their aggregate and continual notification, the stresses that our children are enduring and the learning gaps they are trying to close would gain as much attention and garner as much collective anxiety as the virus itself. I deeply believe that our district teams always have the best interest, future goals, and safety of our kids at heart. But I do think it is time to start asking more targeted questions about our practices based on current information and evaluate critically whether or not our current practices are necessary and more detrimental to the perceived or actual medical risk. Masking the general student and faculty population, in my view, is only one piece of the broader school experience. To review it collectively, students currently wear face coverings, use hand sanitizer, wash hands several times a day, are limited to 2 students in the bathroom at a time, and wait in the hallway on spaced floor markings before advancing into the bathroom. They are unnaturally spaced in the classroom facing one direction, ungrouped for activities, lessons, or play. They are masked on the bus, before and after school, and outside activities, during athletic play and artistic performance. Students eat lunch in separate places, spaced apart, in assigned seats, and have snack and a timed rotation. At the middle school, they eat lunch separated by vertical table dividers. Thankfully, students have regained access to lockers, but it is not the same passive socially interactive activity it once was. I don't mean to paint a bleak picture because there are beautiful things still happening every day and learning is happening. But I don't think it's okay to dismiss the collective impact of these factors on our students. I had the occasion to walk some of our first grade daisies to the restroom at a recent meeting, and for the first time saw the group of signs about the restroom entrances. They were thoughtfully done, with cute graphics and simple wording, but collectively they left a pit in my stomach. I thought, my goodness, these little peanuts are surrounded by this all day, every day. The takeaway from all of this is there is something to fear. How could our kids go through this and not be affected? Sure, there may be some who are unfazed and will have no lasting memory at this time, but many are missing out on critical periods of development and internalizing more than we know. A friend shared with me that when she asked her young child if they knew why they had to wear a mask, the child's response was, "So I don't kill anyone, Mom." Perhaps that's not a common response, but as uncomfortable as some are with the idea of any level of risk of long-term health complications, I am equally unnerved by this small child's. Our kids, little and not so little, are sweet and kind and obedient. They will do what we ask them and follow the rules. They want to please us, they want to be liked, they want the favor of their teachers and peers. Because we know this, we cannot rest on phrases like kids are resilient and they'll get used to it. It's our collective responsibility to weigh and measure and analyze and make evidence-based decisions. I would feel better if everyone wore a mask is no longer an acceptable decision-making measure. I think we have to be willing to consider what goal each of our practices is helping us achieve, and perhaps it's time to reevaluate those goals and determine if they remain relevant. That is not a statement of judgment or indication that anything previously enacted was a mistake. Our work must be ongoing and flexible, and we have to be ready and willing to change as new information comes to light. I'm confident that mask wearing, distancing, and other protocols can be safely phased out and eliminated. I'm surrounded daily by students in small classrooms with minimal ventilation who do not maintain proper masking, work in groups with desks put together. My students are in the cafeteria by the hundreds at a time, face to face, shoulder to shoulder, unmasked. They're jammed in the hallways. Most noses are uncovered, and every 5 to 10 students have their masks. Every 5 or 10 students have their masks hanging off their face. You have to shuffle your feet to get through the halls at passing time, waiting for the congestion to budge so you can take your next step. The kids drive each other to school, spend time with family and friends, and I am not aware of the COVID positivity rate in my workplace being higher than other surrounding schools. The imperfect implementation of protocols has not resulted in a disproportionate number of cases or spread or death. What does continue to remain disproportionate are the number of students seeking mental health support, not engaged in their learning, behaving in harmful ways, not attending school due to anxiety, depression, and the inability to participate in the social construct of their school community. Did much of this exist before COVID? Yes, it did, to an extent. But there's no denying the increase in frequency and complexity, or that it's reached our littlest learners. Jim Hines stood proudly in a classroom at Frenchtown Elementary School the other day, and student desks were visibly grouped. I don't have full knowledge of how our protocols compare to those in neighboring districts and others of similar size throughout Connecticut, but my observations and impressions that they are on the restrictive end of the spectrum. So my questions again emerge. What are we doing? Does the actual risk require what we are doing? How might our practices hinder learning and social growth? And what data and evidence are our own schools are we using to support our decisions around these practices? As we move forward, these important decisions will not be made by one individual. We have to continue to ask each other meaningful, evidence-driven questions that uncover the part of the issues. We have to remain objective, open, kind, and mindful listeners. As a science educator, questions are kind of a thing for me. I will keep asking them and be ready to analyze and consider the answers, and I hope that all of us will do that together. For those who are not confident these measures should be removed, I need help understanding your concerns. If you think we are not there yet, why aren't we there yet? What does that mean to you? How will we know when we're there? What data are you using to determine why we aren't? For teachers, I'm almost done. 55% of those who responded to a survey conducted by the CBA favor a continuation of the mask mandate. As a board member and fellow teacher, I need help understanding what issues remain and why some teachers still want masks in schools. It's critical that you are all part of the conversation. From our administrators, I need help understanding your thinking and decision-making process and how current information about the virus can be used to determine best practices moving forward. From the entire community, please, as with every difficult transition, continue to see each other as human beings, and every time you speak of these issues, picture a child. My sincere thanks for listening. Thank you.
Any additional board member comment?
Well, I'll just say ditto to what Jenny shared. To what Jenny shared, I think it was very, very thoughtful, and certainly appreciate sharing that. We have great confidence in Dr. McKinnon. We know that he's going to be mindful of all the things that he needs to look at before he makes a final decision. But I'm also just as confident, and so very much appreciate the parents that came today to share their thoughts and feelings. And I can tell you, you are a very small percentage of the number of calls and emails that I've gotten over the last 24 hours who feel exactly the same way. So thank you for coming out. Thank you again, Jenny, for your thoughtful comments, John, for your leadership. And we'll get this thing squared away just as quickly as we can.
Very good. That will take us to administrative reports.
Okay, thank you. I too would like to thank all the families for attending tonight and sharing their points. And Julia, you mentioned something that's very important, which is making sure that every voice is heard. And over the past 24 hours, I'm sorry, Julia.
That's okay, Rachel. We're one.
Thank you, Julia, sorry. In the past 24 hours, I think I'm up to about 80 emails from parents expressing their viewpoints on the changes that Governor Lamont announced approximately 24 hours ago, where he acknowledged that his executive powers end on February 15th, and that he has asked the legislature to extend the mask mandate until February 28th. So that's where we are. I'm deeply touched by every communication that I've received. I've responded to every family member that has sent an email, except Fiona. I'm going to respond to her a little bit about my response. Because every person's story is deeply personal. I recall the parent email today where the family member said that their child is on the autism spectrum and has had a great deal of difficulty communicating over the past 18 months because they're wearing a mask and seeing social cues and reading intonation and so on has been difficult for that child. I also recall the email from a parent member who talks about how they've got immune compromised family members that live with them and they're deeply worried and scared about what this change means. Everyone brings their unique experiences to the table. And I do think it's very important that we value everyone's decision, because the one thing that I'm worried about is that we're divided over this issue. In the 80 emails that I've received, approximately half are for ending the mask mandate and half are for extending it. So it's very difficult as a leader and as a board to build the kind of consensus around a topic that's complicated as this. And that's what good leaders try to do. They try to listen, they try to build consensus, and we collaborate. The governor has said that it is a local decision about the next step. There is no blueprint that says it should be the board that makes the decision or the superintendent that makes the decision. In reality, we have to lead together. And over the next couple of weeks, I will be meeting with the local health department officials to get their input on what the next steps are. And I'll be talking to board leaders and to you about where we are in that process. But, you know, we are deeply concerned about student performance and how students feel. We're worried about the number of students that are requiring interventions. I think I mentioned last Saturday at our budget presentation that we've lost over 90 days of learning and we've gone to remote, that almost 500 students and staff members have been quarantined as a result of COVID-19. So there is a measurable impact on this pandemic over the past 18 months. I can tell you, I have the benefit of coming recently from another district. I've been in ER9 for only 4.5 months. That ER9 is not more restrictive than other communities. And I know that because I also talk to superintendents all the time. We generally have the same mitigation strategies in place where we talk about social distancing and masks and mask breaks. So I would just close by reiterating that I we heard you. Thank you again for coming. And Jenny, thank you again for your comments tonight. I think we will evaluate all the information over the next couple of weeks, as we have been trying to do. Thanks for what I will say about that. And in terms of other administrative reports, we do have a couple of administrative reports. We're going to keep them a little bit shorter this evening because our main event is really talking about the budget, which we hope that you stay and listen to. The budget is really one of the most important things that we can have a conversation about as a community, because it really does measure our priorities and our goals. So I'd love to start with Kim from Senator Staples Elementary School.
I'm going to not talk about COVID or social distancing or masks. Jenny said something in her letter that I thought was a perfect segue to what I wanted to talk about. What I think about all the time, prior to COVID and currently, is relationships. Our job as educators is a relationship building business, and to maintain these relationships requires an awful lot of work and creativity and inspiration. And tonight I wanted to share with you one example. I have a teacher in 2nd grade who has been dedicating a month, each month we've been in school, to a different social emotional element. For the month of January, she dedicated the entire month to teaching kids about empathy. And at our level, we talk to children about putting yourself in the shoes of somebody else, someone else's different experiences. And we weave in, famous Black Americans, we weave in most definitely students of differences who are in our classrooms. We give them books so that they can see characters in the books that look like them, authors who write these books that look like them. And this particular teacher took it one step further. She wanted all kids to explore the differences of those who are hearing impaired. And we happen to have a black belt in ASL, American Sign Language, in Jen County. Jen's sitting back there, and I asked Jen if she'd be willing to dedicate, a lot of her free time, because she has so much of it in her very best job, to going into the second grade and teaching the kids a little bit of sign language, because they have a student who has some interest in learning about American Sign Language. And from the hearts of these little children, they wanted to create a video. And she found a book called All Are Welcome. And I asked John if he would be willing to share this video. It's just 3 minutes. And I think it's an absolutely brilliant and adorable example of the wonderful things that Jenny talked about in her letter that is in fact happening in our classrooms, in spite of being socially distanced and masks. I hope you enjoy it. Isn't it adorable? So I just want to thank, that's Mrs. Hannah Haydu, our second grade teacher, and I'd like to thank Jen Conti for doing that.
Good luck. Really wonderful.
I can't top that. But I can give you a couple quick updates. One, I wanted the board to be aware that today, all the grade students met with Gilboa High School counselors and started preliminary booking their schedule for next year, which is very exciting. And saw all the students in all little offices around the building, conversing with the counselors and the parents at the same time. So that's very exciting milestone as they did that. We had a great parent coffee this morning. We talked about high impact instructional strategies. And we're making a slight change to this. We're proposing to make a slight change to the schedule, moving up plus homeroom time of the day. We talked about this last month a little bit. But we've now worked out the schedule, we've worked with the team leaders. Moving that 6 minutes at the end of the day, plus the passing time to homeroom at the beginning of the day, giving us a full 12-minute period in the day. I think it'll be a little bit softer start. It doesn't impact the instructional time at all the periods stay the same length, but it allows a little bit softer start to the day. We're not in such a rush to get the attendance in the pledge. And maybe we can do a little bit of morning meeting, kind of greeting stuff, so kids can start the day connecting with their peers rather than just rushing off to their first class. And then I included in the board report tonight some updates on extracurriculars. I know we talked about that last month as well. There are, you can see at the bottom of the, on the backside of the report, 98 students, these are 90 individual participants in 6th grade, 7th grade, and then 99 in 8th grade, for a total of 296 participants in the clubs. And there are 176 unique individuals participating. So we have 176 students out of 319. So about 55%, a little over 55% of our students are actually participating in our extracurriculars, which is a very remarkable number in my mind. I don't think I've worked in a school or district that had over half the kids at a middle school level participating in extracurricular activities. So I know that will be part of the budget conversation that we're coming up, so I want to have that numbers on that.
Any questions about the class?
Yeah, sorry, 176 unique individuals. Yeah, no problem. All right, thank you all.
Mrs. Del Conte is going to defer her time. She actually has a presentation during the budget portion of the agenda item. And Mr. Petrozelli can also provide an update on our budget topic summary for this month. Can you come up to that? Okay. In that case, I'll pass the mic.
So I understand the importance of coming up for line of sight on where we're going to land. That's one of the things that we're focused on for this meeting. Unfortunately, we ran out of hours, but I do have some points that I'll go over that will help us have something full line of sight hopefully by next meeting. So if we look at the budget object summary, I'm going to go over some highlights, and then if you have any questions, let me have to take them. So a couple of things. If we look at, I'm going to mention an account code, and then we can look at that. So I'm going to look at account code 103 first. If you look, there's the unexpended, we'll see negative 13,000 on each school. So that's just a transfer that needs to happen. That is in the process of happening. That's ready to pay for part of the director's salary. And, we'll make that. We're in the process of making that this month, so that'll look better next month. We go down to 107, the guidance counter, so that's breakage, and I'll speak a little bit more about the opportunity we have in breakage after I go through this report. We go down to 111, the general education teacher, that's also a breakage. If you look at 112, you'll see the negative numbers of 33,000 and 39,000. This is, as you know, we implemented a new software system, and that's just a coding issue, so we're working on that now. That's just expenses that hit the wrong code that's being corrected, so yeah, we're doing a full court press now to, because of where we are in the year, to make all these changes now. So if we look at 114 and 115, those are just, we normally would, we don't normally encumber all of these expenses, so that's why we're okay for where we are right now. We go down to the subs, 121, 122, I'm just going to call these out because of the percentage. You can see it's very low. This is due to the 1, 2 subs versus the other subs, so we're okay on these line items. If we go down to 125, 126, remember, Parker, I believe you had a couple of questions here, and these are going to be answered on the Q&A portion of the meeting later on. I'm looking forward to it. If we look at 127, the pre-K classroom, that's just a pair that's being reassigned. If we look at,
Wait, I'm sorry, which item is that? 127?
yes, I'm sorry, 127.
Thank you.
We go down to 130. So this is ready to reunite reimbursement process. So we'll see those negative numbers go away. Conversely, if we look at 135, this is Easton to reimburse ready. So that's why we see 67%. If we go down to 137, I believe this is also another question that's going to be answered during the Q&A with BT. 138 is the same also. So if we go down to 221, 222. Right, Scott, I'm sorry, you said the 137 and 138. We're gonna talk about that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You go down to 221 and 222 again. These are council issues that we're fixing. I won't get into the detail of the certified ones and the non-certified in place. We're fixing those. If we go down to 251, you'll notice that there's no budget, but we have expenses of 5,000. So that's just a matter of during the pandemic, the state extended their unemployment. So that's that. I just want to call it out. Again, if we go down to the 270 and 271, there's just some numbers and brackets, and that's purely just, we have something in the medical lines that's a payment in lieu of medical, and we just have to adjust the PO. That's take those into consideration. So those are fully encumbered as it should. So I just want to go down to 327, which is our professional services. Because if you look at school 11, it's only at 20% at this time of the year. But we spoke to Jen, she assured me that her team is going to spend all their money, so that we don't have an opportunity of 62,000. Maybe she won't spend it all. We will have some. So the other ones I want to point out are 411 and 421, and I know this was a question of somebody's that we'll address later. We'll address later when we do the budget comparison. But I don't have an explanation. It wasn't budgeted. They didn't budget for water last year. The same with disposable services, and I'll speak to those a little bit when I get down to the bottom here. We have a line of sight, just not the line of sight. I want everything to determine where we're going to land. Again, for 430 though, we do have an opportunity because last year they budgeted around $9,500 for something that we're not going to do this year. And again, we'll see that below. So the ones we're going to talk about now, I'm going to speak about below because these are expenses that we're going to have to find money for this year. So you're in the cleaning repair services. So this was 11,000. This was an open PO from last year. So we have to we have to close open purchase orders at the end of the year, so we can start the new year. And some of them are open longer than we would have liked to for a variety of reasons. We could have cut back for the parts, or they just weren't going to do the service. So we're going to close those deals. So this one was actually, we had a mold issue. So this has to do with the mold issue. We had to buy some ceiling tiles. There was also one flashing that we did remediation. So that's 11,000 that wasn't in this year's budget. The same on for 450 capital improvements. You notice that there was 19,000 spent there. We have 17,706. That was also from PO from last year. And if you remember, this is for the stair treads that were, so it's a safety issue, and they're on back order, and they came in. The only other ones that I'll call out now is we go to 561, which is tuition. This is for the open choice. And we'll be getting the first payment around the February, March timeframe, so we'll see that number change. Again, for 564, that's the special education accessible cost adjustment, so we'll be seeing that number change also. I want to call them out for the folks. Oh, is that going to be part of the Q&A? Sorry? Is that going to be part of the Q&A? I believe it might be. I'm not absolutely sure because I wasn't in Dr. McKinnon's office. What's 83? All day today. I'm sure they had those discussions. So $83,000.
Is that in the budget discussion? We don't do that one, right? We do not have a slide. Okay, so. Okay.
There wasn't anything really other that I wanted to call out other than on dues and fees. You'll notice that we're over budget by like $6,500. It's just for some reason they didn't budget for Tri-State, the Tri-State Consortium, HAB, and CES just weren't in the budget. So what I did at the bottom is just from here for the knowns that we know right now. If we were to take the state unemployment extension, the water, the disposal, the mold mitigation of the ceiling tiles, and the open yield from the stair treads, and the amount that what's budgeted broken out, we're coming up to 54,282.78. So that's going to be money that we need to find this year in the budget. So we do have some of the pieces for the line of sight, just not all of them now. We also went through, I think he was nice enough to spend some time with me because I wanted to know where we were as far as employment and salaries, see where we are there. Give me a second, so I can call it up. So right now, Easton, it looks like we have a break of about 170,000. So again, we'll put a little bit more rigor behind this number. So that's a good thing at this point. What we can see between the VRIP, which is going to be answered during the Q&A. The breakage took place after we approved the budget for this year. Yes, so this 170 is looking real right now. That's what I have as far as the cost object summary and just the two other comments there. We have the issue of the VERPA, the retirement plan. Fair? Yeah, and no, I appreciate it. And that's $102,000 a year, each year for 3 years. We paid it in June of 2021. I don't see that it has been encumbered anywhere in the object summary. Yes. For this year. What's the plan for that? There's a slide in the presentation. For that slide. So there is just hesitating because I didn't know if I should speak to it now, but it's a slide in the presentation. I will be saying shortly.
A little bit of color to speak to that. So Vicki went through and poured through all of the budget conversations we had, where your recollection of that is exactly the same recollection I had, as well as that was what the plan was. She could not find us making those instructions, and it doesn't appear that that's what happened. So it may be that we are looking at for the 2022-2023 school year, that's the year that we're putting in the second payment instead of the third. It may be that we are able to use some unused funds at the end of this year to make the second payment, so that the third is in fact part of the 2023 we thought was going to be the case. So there's still a little bit more digging to do to really make sure that those are the sort of facts of the situation, but that's where we're at right now. Is it's either the second or the third that we're making next year.
Scott, you mentioned that there was some open invoices for money that had been encumbered or were supposed to be encumbered, but wasn't. There is on capital improvements. Where I feel like I'm shouting over whatever this.
There were open POs at the end of last year, so we had to close the year. We couldn't do that with open POs. And the work was actually, all the work that was done last year was done. So I had them close the POs. Maybe it wasn't the best decision at the time, but I had to, when I first started, we're well into the year, well, the time was closed, the audit should be done. So, I closed the POs, and then the treads come in. So, we didn't have that money budgeted in the current year.
What happened to the monies that we had at the end of last year? According to the year-end budget, we had 53,000. You know the answer to that, Rick?
I think they went into healthcare. It's based on the healthcare report.
There was 53,000 unspent. Was also 117,000 that had been encumbered. So that if it's in the encumbered line at the end of the year, that means obviously you didn't spend it. So that's 170. You think it's in there yet?
Well, there's and I don't want to jump around here, but there's a DOE approved addition to contributions to healthcare, $343,000. That didn't happen.
Right.
But it's on this sheet, so there might be an audit trail. In the end, there's 17 million allocated and some number less than that spent. And whether it wasn't spent, we don't do accrual accounting, so it wasn't allocated or encumbered in the 2021 budget and spent this year. Scott did the right thing by closing the book. So who knows where they put it, but that's not right. Or maybe it is right. Maybe it did go into the healthcare fund. But it's on this sheet. And that's one of my questions. It's been that question for a couple of meetings. But anyways, it's a good question. I had the same question. Basically, what did we, if the meeting minutes from last April, May, June, maybe, should have an allocation of $100,000 and some odd thousand of capital improvements, or whatever the number is.
127.
And it was encumbered, but it was never funded, and then the POs are canceled, and now it's showing up in this year's cash outlay because we're on cash accounting, not accrual.
Right.
And so it's interesting, but I'm not sure if it's not irrelevant of what we did last year because it got wiped out. And the money didn't get spent. It didn't show up in your paycheck or my paycheck, so it didn't get spent. So the town still has it.
To be clear, there are no paychecks going to that's not a thing. I get the joke, but just want to make sure.
All right.
Yeah,
Make sure everybody's paying attention.
I have all that information back at the office. I just don't have it with me. So the question is, what do we do with the unexpensed funds from 2020 to 2020?
Exactly. Well,
yes, the board would have had to have voted on and approved what we did with it. So I have it home. Just it seems like my own. But I have it back in the office. So
Okay,
I can get that to you. Those days.
yeah, and it may be worthwhile to connect with
Because
Vicky as
actually,
well.
we did it in two. I think my predecessor came in and get something towards the end of the year, maybe the May, June time.
Right.
And then once I close all the POs and everything, we have another number. And you guys voted on it, but, you know, just give me tomorrow.
That would be
Because
helpful.
that'll be all, that's all in the minutes.
Yeah, and if we're meeting again on Thursday to continue budget conversation, so it'd be immensely,
Sure.
you know, helpful to have that there. I think it may be helpful, if Vicky's able to, maybe we could have a slide that sort of summarizes the work she did to find out.
Got a quick question for Scott. Breakage was, and it's probably a combination of two, but is the breakage that we're showing people that we never hired, or people that we hired and then, or that were employed and then moved on halfway through the year?
Or somebody.
That's all.
And are we talking about the healthcare now, or are we moving on?
I think we
This page?
I think we can move on to talk about the healthcare.
Okay.
So I marked this draft because it's still been officially statement, but I know that you guys wanted to see it, so I wanted to get the claims in there. And Sharon, I just want to point out, like, it might look like they're a lot higher, but there's 5 Fridays, if you remember, in January, and then so there's, I don't want to say an extra week, but there's an extra week. Sure.
We have any advice or any insight from Brown and Brown related to sort of how we're tracking for the year and what their expectations are for our spending? And have they been engaged to help us understand what the prospects look like for next year?
So what we did after we sent an email to Brown and Brown to see if they'll come to the presentation. You guys are good.
We can provide an update on that.
Okay. Oh, good, perfect. Okay, so we can dive in on that.
There may not be a round presentation, but we can certainly answer.
Okay, good.
No, Scott, where this 343 came from, because we did not approve the $343,000 healthcare contribution.
The slide together Thursday to go
Yeah,
along with the.
And just for everyone's context, as we came into budget season last year, it's a very normal process to say, let's make sure our account has what it needs to have in it, and recommendations from Brown and Brown is roughly 25%, right? So, right, 4 months worth of your expenses to make sure that as a self-insured setup that we can stay solvent. And as we approached this same season last year at this time, we saw that we were not drawing down as much as many districts were. We were holding steady, and so we did not see the need to put in a lot of extra funds. So we're zero. Yeah, so we put zero in, and now we're wondering where is this contribution coming from? Right. So, and it absolutely makes sense that there would be some, line items in the budget that were, sort of tracking from here that go over to here because of the shift to the new accounting system that we went through last year. But we still need to track it. We can't just assume it's just an accounting error. We need to know exactly what's going on.
So I do have the number highlighted, like, so I just don't have a comment.
That's fine. So in order, this is it's near impossible to follow this. You start off at 912 and you end up at 701, except we're way below budget from an expenditure standpoint, to the tune of like $500,000. So a normal person would say, if you started the year with $900,000 balance and you're $500,000 to the good, the balance should be $1.4 million to the good today, 7 months into the year. So what I would like to see, we can talk about this offline, is we allocate $209,000, call it $210,000 a month. Our average expenditure is $145,000. You multiply that by 7, you get $500,000 to the good. So if we started the year at 912, which I'm not sure we did, even though we ended the year at 912, so it'd be logical to say we did start the year, except for the 343. We started the year at 912. Right now, if we were contributing, which we don't, every month, 209,000 into a piggy bank, this 700,000 would say $1.4 million. Would be $700,000 more. And because this is going to be critical as we roll through the next 6 weeks, we need to know, making some assumptions. You can assume that we spend our budgeted allotment the next 5 months, so we don't pick up any money. Where do we end the year? To me, it would say we'd end the year with a balance of 1.4. Years past, Brown & Brown begged us to have 2 months of reserves, and we didn't. We operated, 47,000, we just looked back 3 years ago. So to say we need, 3 months or 4 months, I would disagree. I would say we need 2 months, but that's a topic for another day. So that's a $400,000 or $500,000 reserve, not $1 million and change. There's not an extra $1 million here because you can't do it. Once it's in there, it stays. But we can adjust our allocation, our budget for next year accordingly if we have the math that we show. So,
yeah.
Anyways.
Even if we went to a 4 month, it would still be a lot lower than it is.
Yeah.
If we, so just to be clear, when Randy talked about going offline, that does not include any quorum of the board. That would be in the legal meeting. He's, I think, talking about just giving me some details about what he's looking for so that I can work with the administration to make sure that we have that in time for Thursday. Is that an accurate reflection of what you're looking for, Randy?
Yeah, I'm just offering it.
Or if you wanted to work with Scott to iron out those
One-on-one
details as well, so it'd be helpful as well.
Right.
There's been other districts that have commented on what this report is showing, what it's doing, so maybe when we get out of budget.
Yeah.
The budget cycle, I'll be able to, you guys like.
Redesign it so that it's more insightful, right? Yeah, it's just more insightful, yeah.
When you're looking at this, and Randy, to your question, we're looking at deposits here of 992,000. Last year we had 2.7, year before 3 million. We're already halfway through the year. Those deposits should be higher. My question would be, is Easton Town Hall who sends us the money to put into these accounts? Are they a month or two behind?
No, we don't invest the money for them, I'll talk with Vicki first thing in the morning. I don't know which team we're on at this juncture, but when she sees the number at a certain level, she will ask for the money.
They don't call unless they need it. Scott would say 2 years ago, we didn't call it because we don't need it. What's the sense?
Right. You just got to make sure that by the end of the year, the money that we have budgeted for insurance ends up back in our account. It doesn't sail off to somebody.
Or based on all the assumptions they might have some expenses.
Okay. Thank you. Any additional questions, Randy, Jenny, Devin, and Jen? Any questions? No. Okay. Jeff, anything else? Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you. If that's the end of administrative reports, yes? Yes, that takes us to discussion and possible action. We have item 6A, the 2022-2023 budget questions and priorities. So a brief setup. Well, Dr. McKinnon is getting his screen set up. Did I say it was I didn't think it was so as a part of the budget process, we met on January 22nd. Let's say that that's right. And we started this process of reviewing the priorities and the budget as presented by the superintendent. At that time, we were asked to collect our thoughts and put together our questions and present them and sort of get them over to Dr. McKinnon, and the central office staff and the building leaders went about researching these questions and seeking to answer them. So what we have here are a collection of many questions presented back for us to have to start our conversation and dialogue around. And I think the idea is that this is the starting point. And at the end of the presentation, certainly continue questions. We also have time on Thursday, so we don't need to try to bottom out tonight on the conversation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. McKinnon.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you to the audience members for staying and sticking it out. I'm very grateful that they're still here. Just to remind everyone, we presented the Easton Board of Education budget 2 Saturdays ago. And at the time when we presented the proposed superintendent budget, we were asking a 4.55% increase in the amount of $783,498. So that is where we have started the conversation. We have all of our budget information onto a superintendent website. And if you go to this website, you can click on the budget detail spreadsheet on the left-hand side, and it will take you to a Google sheet. And from there, you'll be able to go in and to review each cost center and go deeper with each click as you go in and review each account. We've also put our presentation on this site. We'll put our budget workshop tonight there as well, and there's also an opportunity. We did receive over 79 questions regarding the budget, and so the team at Central Office has sent individual emails from our budget email address, budgetresponses@er9.org. So you should have received some individual emails with some smaller answers to some questions we've asked. But for some of the questions that have recurring themes, this is why we created some slides. We noticed that more than one person asked them. And if you're watching this at home, you can use that QR code to continue to ask questions, and that will go into a sheet, and we keep track of every question that's asked. We'll provide an answer either to you personally, or we will develop a budget slide for future workshops. So we're going to start the presentation with just some corrections, and some of these corrections again will be addressed some questions that you may have asked. We'll start in the paraprofessional instruction, with the PPS instructional paraprofessional line. And one of the areas we want to point out was that in the 2021-2022 budgeted amount, there was an incorrect amount, which actually skews what the 2022-2023 cost center would actually reflect for that particular line. So it should represent a $6,206 increase, or 2.12%, instead of the $36,000 increase. So that is I'm just talking about an error. It doesn't change what we budgeted in this area for next year, but it does reflect a different starting place from the 21-22 budget.
So does that mean that the end result would be, it looks like we are either significantly reducing or significantly increasing when something like that happens?
It depends on the error, whether it's to the good or the bad. But in this case, the way in which we reported it, that particular line looked like a $36,000 increase, but in reality, it's only a $6,000 increase. The next line, we'll talk specifically about paraprofessionals in these two lines in the subsequent slide. But the amount for a PPS instructional paraprofessionals, the amount for 5 paraeducators in the 22-23 budget was $166,000. This value was incorrect. It should represent $105,000, and so that actually represents a $67,800 deduction for 22-23 budget. So that is a good line that we make. We'll talk about that in the next slide. Just a minor change here. We removed PE, adapted PE stipend for $4,119. In terms of Power School, we updated Power School renewing prices, so that will reflect an increase of about $4,000 next year. Transportation, we budgeted correctly, not at 3%, but at 2%. So that represents a deduction of $8,900. And electricity, there was an error calculating electricity for next year, and that is an error to the bad of $59,000. So we'll talk about that. There's a slide in subsequent error presentation where we go into that.
with a $30,000 increase.
So in terms of the paraprofessional line, just as I was talking about, that's just,
So are those changes reflected in that, in the 4.55%? Are they going to be reflected?
they, yes, the 4.5% was where we started the conversation 2 Saturdays ago. You will see now that we are down to about 4.3, around 4.3%. So we've made the changes reflected in our document. The board review and on the website that has not been updated yet. That's at 4.45. So
where are you? 'Cause I'm in the document. And I'm trying to follow you and the questions that I didn't write down, but I typed together. So where is, like, where in the document is this speaking to this?
okay, so if I go out of here for a second, and we're talking about instructional paraprofessionals. If you go into, this is a superintendent proposed recommended budget, and you can see actually there we're at 4.3%. So you would go into instructional paraprofessionals. Yes, services. Instructional paraeducators. And so this is where it would be in the budget sheet. And so what we've done is we've modified, so PPS instructional paraeducators, that change is actually reflected.
I'm looking at eight tabs on the cost center, Staples, Keller, district-wide facilities. Which one do I start with?
Right now, I'm highlighting a slide in the instructional paraprofessional slide. So which tab? Right. Okay.
I'm here, right? I'm at the very beginning of the gargantuan thing.
Yes. So you would go to, right at the beginning, you would go to the cost center, pupil personnel services.
Possible moving forward, but this is even an appropriate time for it out. But when we've had sort of these subsequent summaries of changes, we have them as handouts at the beginning of the meeting. And I can speak for myself, but I found it infinitely helpful to have it sent in advance of the meeting to take a look at before now. And also to have it in front of me to make notes on, jot things down, questions, in addition to having the digital platform.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree.
I don't know if that's possible to do moving forward.
As a part of this process, I would suggest two edits to the process, which I think are pretty reasonable. So this presentation that we're going through right now, just having printouts of that makes a really big difference, because then you just jot notes down as you go through, not have to go the flow, and then you can go back to it. In addition, I think having what I would just call a sort of delta summary, everything that's changed, just having a summary at the beginning, just a slide that says this went from this to this, this went from this to this. And I think we had a little bit of that in that slide that we showed, where we had the technical corrections. But I think there may be, is it, or maybe I'm wrong, was that everything that changed?
That, well, yeah, I mean, we're going to move through the slides, but I hear what you're saying, Jane. We can definitely get you hard copies of this material so you can make notes.
Good. And ahead of the meeting, ideally. I think
Which isn't always possible,
Yeah.
like you said, you just put out man hours, and that's, it's gonna, if somebody there at a certain time of day, make photocopies of things that are absolutely, sensitive and understanding of that, but, just in terms of who's with us, students, if
Yeah.
I'm going to put something up that is technical and detailed in nature, and also giving them something. Because visually, trying to absorb it visually from a distance without, I don't know, for me being, it's challenging to process and internalize it and understand just from senior.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if best case scenario, we get it ahead of time. There are plenty of times when it's, it's just a man hours issue. But printing, I mean, I think.
Or fire it up as an email, and
Sure.
if I want it, I can print it on my own.
Right.
Printer at home. or
Yeah,
not.
and I think there's also a possibility of literally printing it here, right? Like sending it to the printer in the main office here as a part of the job, if it is a sort of just-in-time thing. So we can. Okay.
Sorry.
You're gonna work on that. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. So we were. Randy, do you feel like you're oriented now? Do you see where this is tying back to the budget, the online version of the budget doc?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And some of these questions were questions that we processed today and put into the slide.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes we're playing kind of catch up and we're building the plan as deploying it. So, but I hear what you're saying. It's useful to have.
It's just in time stuff that is the nature of when the questions come in and the amount of hours we have. And it's also the nature of the tri-district that we're a part of, because Reading had these detailed, crazy conversations, a few days ago. And now, as soon as they're done with us, they're, they move on to Region 9. So
Actually, we're working in Region 9.
right now, you're actually also doing Region 9.
I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
But, I think the other key point is that our budget sheets are live. And so we're making change in real time. But to highlight the changes that I talked about in the previous slide, the 5 special education paraeducators, in 2021, 2022, it was budgeted at 87,000. It should have been budgeted at 116,000. So that is that slide right there. Okay. In 2022, 2023, 105,000 is the correct amount, not 166,000. So that is a technical change that we've made, and that accounts for savings. In that other line, the 8 paraprofessionals, 144,212. That's what was budgeted for 2021, 2022. It should have been 173. So the delta between 173 and 198 is actually smaller. So it should show us a smaller increase. Okay. So that is this amounts to a kind of technical changes. Yes, it should have been 177. Obviously, if it's 144 and 198, it's a bigger difference, a bigger percent increase. We're just trying to tell the story.
In this same section, you have 4 pre-K pairs at 99 and it's going to 67. Was that an error?
I have to back out and take a look. But if you look in the top left-hand corner, this amount here, it was shown previously as a 13.8% increase. Really, it's a 2.1. Top left-hand corner.
Mine says a 37% increase. This PBS instructional pairs, right?
PBS instruction. So, Randy, what you're looking at is you are seeing the Board of Education view. And we have not, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, have we changed the Board of Education view on the website?
No, not, we have not. I thought we worked through that after the meeting, but I'm happy to make you my time. I believe the answer to your question, Randy, is that what he's talking about is the fact that there are 2 errors, and learned that was in the 2021, 2022, where it was under budgeted.
Yes.
And so, and the other error was in Is that what you were?
And I got that. I was just going down another line item to four,
To the for special ed paras?
yes.
Yes, so yes, that line item is correct.
So we,
So line 10.
right, did we, but we're $32,000 to the good with the same four pairs?
So there was swapping. So those particular pairs. Type of systems. I can double check, but even that's, those are my notes on that. And Jen has my notes as well, that's what I believe is correct. And I can double check.
Okay. So,
We went over this page quite a number of times,
Right.
so we can really take a look at it again. She did.
Okay, so in terms of Scott, in terms of utilities, Scott's going to help me with this slide, but essentially in the area of electricity, you can see that in 2021, 2022, Allen Middle School was budgeted for 101,700, and in 2022, 2023, it was budgeted at 102,000. It should be 115,000. And in 2022, 2023, Samuel Staples is budgeted for 78,000. It should be 124,000. So that was the error at the beginning of the slide of $59,000. Scott, you can talk a little bit about the 3-year averages and where those revised numbers came from.
Sure, so we're gonna see, first, I made an error when we first put the electricity in there. I was trying to consolidate 10 years worth of electricity data, and I grabbed a kilowatt line instead of a dollar line, so that's on me. So having found out, what I wanted to show here is I wanted to go back to a couple of reasons. First, we have the solar project, right? So I wanted to break out what we're paying for the solar, what we paid the past 3 years. Okay. So again, last year, I don't know why they budgeted those numbers so low last year, because that's when I took a historical perspective and got the numbers. So I think they budgeted low last year anyway. So that's where our budget numbers are coming from this year. So I think that's why you might see a higher percentage increase than maybe you thought you would see. But you know, I don't know where they came up with those numbers. There's no notes or breadcrumbs to lead me to where they're getting those numbers. And that's why I took a historical perspective and I went back to 2015. I also had a meeting with Kathy Alfondre and Bobby McCourt. I guess Kathy was involved with the solar project or came onto it years ago. So they walked me through a very complicated spreadsheet, which I'd be happy to go over with anybody at any time. But I know Randy, you had a question as to, you know, what are our savings? So we have in the past 2 years, you know, I gotta switch my glasses. So the last fiscal year was the 42,000 we see in there. I'm just opening up the spreadsheet. The prior year, fiscal year, was 37,000. So this isn't a savings like you started at 100,000. You're going to take 37,000 off of it. That's going to be your new number. This is the savings that they're calculating per month. Again, I have a very complicated spreadsheet, and we'll be happy to go over it with you and show it. So I wanted to show that we are getting some of the savings, and you know, I'm very comfortable with the numbers we're budgeting for this year. You know, and again, that's why I wanted to show the 3-year average, because it's kind of skewed in prior years, and you know, I showed the prior 3 years, so I didn't know what other information I could give you to make you comfortable with that.
it would be interesting, but to know what we were paying for electricity before the solar panels were installed, but it doesn't matter.
You know what, we actually do have it, and what I learned is truly how complicated it is, and that they had three options, and, we took the worst possible option of, just giving it to someone essentially and just get it back, but that's another story, but how they calculate it is they take the peak, the highest you could possibly charge, like at 12 noon on a day when all the kids are eating lunch, and everything's on, and that's what they charge you for that, for a usage. And again, I'm not gonna do it justice, so I'll meet with you at another time if you'd like, but I was astounded at, how the bills are calculated and what we're truly paying and kilowatt usage and then just actually, so.
I think
But we are saving, it is saving us money.
it is. So at the end of the day, that's kind of been a question that pops up every single year is, are we seeing a return? Was this a good investment? Are we worth saving? We think I have.
And we are, and that's, I have the sheet, I calculated each month the savings, but again, it wasn't purely an initiative, and this is how I was explaining it. It purely wasn't an initiative to save money on electricity, it was a green initiative. Samuel Stapler was the biggest user of electricity. So it's kind of serving two purposes.
Scott, this has been a point of frustration for the board over the past few years. And I think it was more about expectation in terms of what the solar fields were going to be able to generate for us in terms of savings. Yes, we are saving some money through the solar project, but it just isn't as much as what at least what I walked away with as the number that we were saving. So it's just a matter of expectation.
Yeah, the other thing that we have to keep into account that we're going to lose 1 to 2% efficiency each year also. So you're not going to get it.
Right.
You're not going to get an increase in the benefit going forward. We're only going to get an increase in benefit. Although it is small, but you need to, I just wanted to bring it up because that's what I learned last week during the presentation.
And if you plot that out in terms of refresh, what does that look like? What does ultimately, is there an opportunity to negotiate to get a better deal, to realize more savings? I think that's not a question for this year or now, but something we want to attack.
But no, John, those are kind of the questions I was asking. And it was an emphatic no for 20 years, but
yeah, but
no reason why we can't go back.
20 years goes by faster than you think, right? All right. Okay, so this is a key slide, and one of our budget questions was asked, what is mandatory expenses? What is non-mandatory expenses? And we actually broke it out a little differently, called discretionary versus non-discretionary. So really, this budget reflects maintenance from what we're doing this year to next year. We are really not including many new things in next year's budget. We'll talk about what those new things represent. But we went through over 900 account lines, and we identified every account line as either discretionary or non-discretionary. Non-discretionary lines include things like salaries, benefits, contracts, insurance, transportation, Medicare, pension, stipends, utilities, and so on. Discretionary includes program-related expenses, stipend, membership, curriculum items. So non-discretionary really comes to over 97% of our budget, and discretionary items account for approximately 2.6% of our budget. And we can show you a couple of examples of how we categorize different accounts into those particular areas. But even if something is considered not discretionary, you might have some discussion about it. For example, health insurance. Obviously, health insurance is non-discretionary. However, how much you fund health insurance is a conversation. The 6th teacher in grade 2
we put in the non-discretionary budget, the non-discretionary side. And that really turns into a conversation about, okay, well, class size and how the numbers of teachers in particular grade 2 impacts class size. Cleaning supplies, that's an example of discretionary, but obviously you need cleaning supplies in order to clean schools. So there's some give and take there. We'll look at that. So here's just some examples of some, I know it's difficult to see, and I'm glad we have handouts now. But again, we went through every account line and we labeled things as discretionary with a D and non-discretionary. That is how we achieved the 97.5.
This is 928 rows.
Correct.
Tagging to understand at the most fine level detail where that's coming from.
Right. And so the next slide are examples of non-discretionary examples. You can see that there are classroom teachers, certified teachers in PPS, district-wide transportation, central office, behavior technicians, custodians, speech and language pathologists. These are some examples of non-discretionary items. So really the new items in the budget are these few things. One is a grade 2 teacher to support class enrollment in grade 2 for $62,000. A special education teacher, which Mr. DeConte is going to talk about, for junior bridges, for again budgeted at $62,000. We anticipate that the introduction of that new junior bridge teacher that supports that program, Jennifer's going to talk about how that would actually be a cost savings, perhaps in the area of hundreds of thousands of dollars, if you think about that program in ways in which it saves outplacement costs and tuition and so on. There's something small in there for library media shelving for $6,000, facility manager, 0.2 to $17,000. I'll talk about that in a moment. So these are just some new items, some highlights, and that was one of the questions that one of you asked. In terms of staff, there are 2.5 math paras over at Central Stapleton Elementary School. One of them is already offset by Title I funds. Dr. Pearson Hugo is going to talk about grants in an upcoming slide. Out of the 2.5 math paras, half FTEs actually in our operating budget, and one is earmarked to receive funding, which is a short-term item. That's not in the budget, but that represents the 2.5. And for Helen Keller Middle School, it's similar, 2.5 total FTE in math paras, where one is in the operating budget. We're currently funding this year 1.5 FTE in math paras, and we're looking to continue that next year. And then again, we're looking to expand the junior bridge program, which is 1 FTE, grade 2 teacher at Central Stapleton Elementary School, and the facilities manager shared across the 3 districts. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Pearson Hugo, who's going to talk about where grants have subsidized operation expenses. And there's a other spreadsheet which is much more detailed, but these are the high level answers.
So this slide really provides an overview of the staff networks that are all set by grant funding. The Title I, which is an annual grant, is fairly consistent with its funding. We typically use that money to pay for a paraeducator. So you can see there's one math paraeducator at Central Stapleton, salary and benefits. And then IDA is also another annual grant that's fairly consistent with funding. These offsets are shown in the operating budget. As you can see, different than the Title I grant, where we identify an individual and the offset goes to that individual's salary. For the IDEA grant, this is an amount of money that simply is paid back into the larger pool when all of the salaries. So for teacher salaries and her salaries at both schools, see the contribution from IDEA. We've received a number of different pandemic relief grants, 7 in total, but for ARC and ESSER 2 grants, extracurricular. There's 1.5 master educator color next year that will be funded with our ESSER, one master educator simple staples, and then we will continue for the second and final year coming in offset to the summer academy program. And I'm looking forward to speaking about that.
Stephanie, why the dollar difference between one math para being a 27.2 and 1.5 being basically twice that?
We need to get the details from Vicki, but my hunch is it has to do with people who take benefits or don't take benefits. All of our the full-time bearers who are eligible for benefits choose to take them. And in some cases, people just start at the beginning of, oh, this is for next year. That's not sorry, so that's not accurate. This is basing on the current individuals in those positions continuing. So these are the money, these are the dollar amounts that were given to me by the human resource manager, looking at the actual salaries in place. So I can't explain what the difference is, but you should get check it today.
Stephanie, does that then mean that this is a reduction from this year's budget, next year's budget is being funded by a grant?
Yeah, these people are being funded by the grant this year, and then continue to be funded by the grant next year.
They're not in the budget.
They're not in the budget.
And the reason for that, I just want to make sure, is these are short-term positions to focus on unfinished learning from COVID. So you don't think we'll need them hopefully past the next couple of years?
Exactly. So the pandemic relief positions and the funding for other areas within what would be in the operating budget are not part of the budget shown as offsets, because the government has been very clear in saying this must be supplemental. It must be related to pandemic relief. You cannot use it to offset something that really should be funded. So the positions you can see here, as well as the other items that have been funded in the grants, are really specific to re-engaging our students, providing efficient work events.
But if a year from now, we're sitting here and we haven't made up lost ground and brought all the students where we want them to be, we may, and the federal government is not providing an additional grant, or the state government's not providing additional grants, we may make the decision to say, we need these, and we may be sitting here talking about figuring out a way to fund these positions out of our budget.
Yes, but as of right now, the money that we have received from the government for the pandemic relief grants will run out at the end of next year if the spending is as anticipated. So you may see a request for additional positions next year.
Quickly recap any positions that we partially fund. I recall the statements, I don't have the numbers right in front of me or exactly what it was, but there were partial positions or partial funding. So positions that were in the budget that were partially funded by grants, and sort of how did that translate into this current?
So, and I think,
Extracurriculars,
and it's a
was there
little bit,
sister?
well, so we have that in another slide.
Okay.
So we had discussions about doing that in a number of cases. I don't know if Stephanie, you have at your fingertips, did we actually end up doing that? Did we partially fund any positions, or did we fully fund either from grants or from our budgets never come in?
You have for next year, you will not have any funding for extracurriculars. That's on another slide. They were funded this year
Out of,
ESSER 2
Right.
and our ESSER. The summer academy salaries are offset by grant contribution, but they're not, it doesn't represent zero cost of parents, certainly, it's just a slight reduction. Other than that, what you see on the slide are all of the positions. I know that there was some conversation and there's a memory that perhaps a social worker salary was going to be offset. That is not documented anywhere. So we did not direct grant funds.
so that can fall out of budget.
Jenny, the only thing that we have in these grants for this year is about 45,000 $45,000, that's a killer.
Yes.
We assured Dr. McKinnon that we weren't setting him up a cliff in the future with.
Correct.
Like, we'll try to build out from underneath.
Right, no fiscal cliffs.
We'll come back to the student activity.
And the board members received quite a comprehensive spreadsheet on Friday that includes more detail regarding grant spending by year and then also by object, so I can answer any questions. Grants.
Okay. So this is the slide that you referred to as VERA, voluntary early retirement incentive program. And really what this comes down to is if we look at end of year funds this year, perhaps even our breakage, it might be possible, this is kind of where you were, that we, instead of paying payment 2 out of next year's budget, we could pay payment 2 out of this year's budget, looking at breakage numbers and unspent funds. And really, the conversation could be, instead of that being payment 2 of 3 in 22, 23, it could be payment 3 of 3. You would just have to direct us to make that change, to make payment 2 of 3 occur this year. I think that is, because right now, payment 2 of 3 is next year.
Do the terms of the VERA dictate when the payments are made? Does that impact this? Possibly. No? Okay. All right. So then, yeah, that'll be something for us to look at later.
I think we've got time, but
yeah,
that's it's not going to change next year. It's still a payment.
Right, exactly. I think we want to try to follow the course that we've set up last spring, which was
Payment 2 this year.
right.
and do we have no intent to offer a new VERA this year? That's certainly my opinion. Is that as of right now the opinion of the administration as well?
We would look for your guidance.
I think the reason I feel that way, and obviously, the will of the board is the will of the board, but I feel that way because I think it's a bad practice to sort of create an expectation amongst teachers that, oh, well, I'll get it next year. It's like that when we do it, we're doing it for a good reason, and I think we need them to see that as a rare opportunity to it would be very interesting to know whether or not we have any indications from current staff that they do intend to retire. We should try to make it clear that there is very little appetite for doing this again this year, unless obviously the board can override,
Well, I think contractually they have until the middle of this month to clear if they were to say that they plan to retire, that there is a small incentive, it's 2,000, like 2,000. So that, the board's way of saying thank you for giving us a heads up so that we can have.
right, and we should make sure they know that that's the extra incentive that's available this year.
There was a question in the budget just about the difference between legal and audit fees, and we're required to do an annual audit each year, so it's $5,700 per school. Legal fees, $20,000 per school, so that's the breakdown. I don't know if the question, whether the question asker wanted to break down the legal fees itself into, but that's the answer. So class size, Kirsten, you guys will help us with this, but we talked about this a little bit already. It's really looking at grade 2 next year, and currently we have 5 sections, and it's possibly 6 sections next year. And Kim has identified that in our current first grade class, there are various students that are experiencing difficulties, and they're in various levels of early intervention process. So the recommendation is to increase grade 2 to 6 sections next year, whereby the class would be approximately 16 to 17.
So can I just ask a quick question? Has there been any thinking about kindergarten? I just wonder, I know is it because we have paras in there? Not that I'm saying we shouldn't have the 6th grade teacher. My question is more should we also be thinking about kindergarten? Because you start to get pretty big at, 20 little humans in a kindergarten classroom is a lot.
But right now, our preschool numbers, based on the schools that typically feed into San Luis Staples, we have a number of 71.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to say is right underneath the column that reads considerations, next to number 2, it says 88 currently in grade 1. It's actually 96 currently in grade 1. Right, if you look at the column 21, 22.
Right.
First grade?
So the column that reads
Oh, I
consideration,
see, you're right.
it should be 96, it says 88.
Right, 88 is current kindergarten, not current first grade.
Correct.
So, bullet number 2, under consideration banner, should say 96. That's right. So, Jeff, move your points right there. Okay, it should say 96. Thank you, Kim. Thank you. And sorry, and so with relation to Devin's question on incoming kindergarten, your point of view is that projection is high.
Projection is high.
Yeah.
The numbers that I have.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Thanks, Kim.
So two Saturdays ago, we made a recommendation where we talked about the addition of a K12 Facilities Manager, where the goal would be to break the Facilities Manager into thirds, where each district will be responsible for 33 Facilities Manager. That was Plan A. It will be approximately $29,000. We've come up with Plan B, which is a reduction to 0.2. It essentially means that there is currently a director of buildings and grounds at the high school, and that person works 5 days a week. The idea would be to cut that position back to 0.6 and have that person work 1 day in Easton and 1 day in Reading, which would be 0.2. The Easton and Reading taxpayers are already paying for that facilities manager at Joel Barlow. And so the idea here is just to think about it in a different way and have that facilities manager represent the town of Easton and Reading, which would mean you're contributing $17,000 and reducing the amount that Region 9 is paying for a facilities manager, which is really, when you think about it, coming from one public taxpayer to another, is a reduction.
This only works though if we all agree.
That's correct.
Is there a contractual issue as well with does the person need to agree to that as well if there's already a person in?
If we move forward with this position, we would have to eliminate the current position and come up with job descriptions and repost the position, and that person would be charitable to it.
Sure. And if we, let's say that we don't have agreement between all 3 boards, but we had agreement between Easton and Reading, is there any workable solution where we could see a 2-day-a-week person? Or that there's a person who is the facilities manager for Easton and Reading. We spend exactly how much we see here, 17.4. Reading spends 17.4, and we get 2 days. We get a day, or they get a day. Is that at all workable?
It's possible, but then you would be reducing the Region 9 facilities record. That would be a full 1.0.
Agree. So that the town ends up paying more, but for our budget, it would be a sort of neutral move. It would just be an additional 30 for the town.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And then in Thursday's workshop, I can provide you with the job description for facilities manager and talk a little bit more detail about what the vision is for that particular position. Describe the need of our facilities and how that position is valuable.
Our Board of Finance, when they invited us in for that initial meeting, they made a point of saying, don't be, penny wise, pound foolish when it comes to budgeting for facilities. And I know that this is not putting in tiles, this is not putting in carpet, but I feel very strongly that this makes sure that all of the investments we do and will need to make in facilities are done in the smartest, most efficient way. So
Do you think this amount of time in each location is sufficient? I was actually anticipating more of an ask. In terms of
I see a K12 facilities manager earning around 87,000. I think that's a market rate for facilities manager. And that's what we started with. It just depends on, we just have to be creative in how we break that up.
I think it's more a question. I think Jenny's question is more about is 1 day a week for Samuel Staples Elementary School and Helen Keller Middle School enough time to do the job of a facilities manager.
Yeah, I didn't mean in terms of funding. I just
Oh,
meant,
right.
You know, we have a lot of individuals in our districts who are spread extremely thin across, traveling back and forth from town to school, you know, giving us their absolute best. But it's a cumbersome, challenging, and, you know, folks quickly burn out, and I just want to sort of set us up from the beginning with asking someone to do more than what we really need.
I think it's a safe entry point where we start here and we evaluate how effective the position is. And we can give you some information on that over time. But to John's point, it is not, you know, we are looking for someone who's highly skilled that can certainly swing a hammer and do some electrical work, and it's probably that has some sort of trade certification that can actually do that work. We're also looking for someone who can develop an RFP, analyze multiple bids coming in, and in the end, identify a contractor that is building a project, like, for example, replacing the roof for $1 million, and actually saving the district hundreds of thousands of dollars in the way in which we procure projects. Is really kind of the objective of this position. It's looking at our facilities and building needs and being highly efficient about managing projects over time.
Any sense from Region 9 about their appetite for reducing the number of hours that this person spends with them? Like, can they,
You know,
can they live without?
I think,
those 2
you know,
days?
it's kind of a chicken or the egg conversation, and we really need to gauge your interest in the position first, like we have in Reading, in order to get to the point where we have the conversation with Region 9 and we make the case to them. Well, this actually benefits them. It's a budget reduction. So it is an interesting conversation. We do have a couple spinning plates and juggling balls in the air when it comes to
Presumably other districts live with one facilities person for half a dozen folks.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, every district I work with has had a facilities director and support staff. And depending on the way in which you use a facilities manager or a director, in New Fairfield, we actually had the facilities director engaged in building a culinary kitchen, knocking down walls, subcontracting out, bringing in multiple people. And we compared that cost to bringing in an outside person doing the entire scope of the project. We saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I've seen it work effectively. And I'm just being honest, you are definitely an outlier in the ERI that you do not have a position like this, especially considering where your buildings are.
It shows. Can I go back to the sixth teacher? Kim, I'm looking at the number of students enrolled in special ed. And there's 13 in kindergarten, 13 in 1. There's only 7 in 2, but there's 15 in 3. Do you know what the 504 numbers are? because someone's gonna ask, why is this class different? Because the special ed numbers would seem to indicate that it's sort of a norm.
I do not.
Don't know the final form? Okay. I think that might be helpful.
Jeff, what are you thinking in terms of how it relates to staffing?
Right.
Grade levels?
If someone's gonna say, okay, so you want a second grade teacher because the kids in first grade are having a tough time. So looking at the special ed report, and it's the same number of kids with an IEP in kindergarten as there is in first grade, and 13 is sort of probably the average of all of our grades. So what else is going on that we could point to justify the teacher?
I think some of it may not actually come in the form of 504 and IEP numbers. It's also peers and intervention. It can be spoken to us about the numbers, the percentage of students receiving grade level who are receiving intervention, who are needing intervention.
Right.
Should we kind of, build a case aligning all of those pieces.
Mhm.
And that's some of it's anecdotal and whether it's building or social work.
My only point is build a case. Yeah, that's
Okay, there's a lot of information on this slide, Dr. Fisher. You've got to take you through the high points for the board.
Yes,
This was a question.
My apologies for the amount of text on the page, but I thought it was worthwhile for you to see spending over time for curriculum work specifically. And then also the request that was made last year, what was actually adopted, which is, you can see an unusually low amount of curriculum work. And then what was proposed for this year. This year is especially important for curriculum writing work, given our need to plan based on the needs of our students. Our teachers have not had an opportunity to work together to adjust pacing guides, to share resources, to really also have vertical conversations to make sure that as they adjusted the focus for instruction and prioritize standards, that we have a roadmap for our students moving through the grades. And summer work barely happened last summer. I was really only able to pull in our content specialists for a handful of days in order to do just the most critical work. And so that's why you see the proposal that's there. So it's a reinstatement, and yes, it is slightly higher than some years have been. But I see this year especially as being so important.
I'm embarrassed to see that number. Should really take a very long how that decision happened, why it happened, to support it.
So I've actually watched the video a couple of times because I will say that the person who actually adjusted the budget did not inform me that he had adjusted the budget. And so I thought this must be a mistake. This must simply be an error that was made. In fact, we did have a lengthy conversation about this in the April 14th last spring. And there were many things discussed. And I think that there was some hope that we would be able to use unspent money from last year and that teachers would be willing to work in June after the school year ended, where we would be able to accomplish some of the work that we typically occur in July and August at the end of June. In fact, at the end of last year, our teachers were so absolutely that even those people who were willing to put in a little bit of the summer did not do that. They really needed it. And so I don't think that it was the intent to completely demolish spending last year, but that is the result of the budget. that is done.
It still makes me feel terrible to see it. Thank you for the explanation. It kind of makes us feel a little better about it.
Stephanie, you made one reference here about the number of teachers involved in one of the bullets here. Do you know the count of teachers that we touched with the other 5 bullets? Like world language, you say 2 teachers.
Right, so this is an estimate. So what I do up here is I basically do a needs assessment, and then I create my budget request, looking at each one of the content areas and what might work for each one. So where it says social studies, I'll give you an example, social studies 1 day, that might mean, that might mean 6 people working for 1 day in 1 school and 3 teachers in the school working for 1 day. So again, allows that cross-grade collaboration. So 1 day does not mean that you're only paying the roughly $360 that 1 day for 1 person you represent, but it's 1 day instead of 60. Right? And so for library media there, library media is that it is 1 day for people. And ideally, when I plan the curriculum for the summer, there is an effort to coordinate with their Reading colleagues so that Easton and Reading teachers together are doing the same work since they share.
So this.
I save some time on this budget slide, and on the next one as well. I've worked in curriculum and professional development for some time. It's really been my background. These areas should be 5 times greater than it is right now. So I know we're talking about what is this teacher going to do here and there and so on. Take it multiply it by 5. A high quality Durgay school district should be spending considerably more for curriculum development, professional development, training, textbook purchases. In fact, this number should be high, and at the end of the year, if we don't spend that number, okay, we'll give money back and we'll transfer money in certain ways. But you should have robust conversations about what's the innovation that we need, what textbooks do we need to revise, where we should be sending teachers professional development, what professional development experts should be bringing into the district. I could spend $20,000 on one consultant alone in the area of readers and writers workshop to raise the level of literature instruction in the classroom. So I am. This is the engine that drives innovation and R&D.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jason and Stephanie. We talk about test scores. We look at how our kids are doing. We hear from the public that they want more innovation and they want STEM and STEAM and advanced programming. And that all starts with making sure that our teachers have the tools and the support, the professional support to do that. We've underinvested in this for oh gosh, I mean, I've been in Easton for 6 years, so for at least 6 years, and think that it can be done internally. And really, you know, especially when we look at the last few years of instruction and how kids continue to you know, have a lot of disruption, not bringing, I think we should be spending more here and finding, you know, again, if there's grant money that we could use or potentially other places where we could find money to invest, especially in early literacy. And we know that in middle school math, we have our math scores are not where we want them to be. I just think we need more here, and it pays off in the long run in terms of kids having better experiences in school, teachers sticking around because they feel invested in, and just a much better outcomes, not just academically, but socially, emotionally for our kids.
And it just means that, I think I talked about this on our budget presentation, the idea of developing a strategic plan and identifying our priorities over the next 3 to 5 years. But that includes saying that not this year But the following year, we need to replace all of our social studies textbooks or whatever the example is. But having that plan in place is important. So this dollar value may be okay for next year. Again, I've already stated how I feel about it. But the idea really is to think about what our strategic plan is, what our vision is, what our core values are, what the attributes of a graduate are at high school, how we build students towards these levels, those goals. Critically important. I know we happen to be talking about this now, but it's important that we talk about this in the next 3 years. And I could show you an example of a 5-year curriculum cycle that I've developed in previous districts that says, here's every single curriculum area that we have K-12, and here's exactly when we're going to be renewing this particular curriculum at different points. And fortunately, Stephanie and I have not had those conversations yet. We're talking about other things. I know you feel the same way.
I do. And for those of you who have been around for a while, you know that we do what's absolutely critical. So in years where a little bit more money has been spent, it's because new standards have been released. And it's an absolute critical investment of time we need to teach that we're writing the curriculum that we're. But that's a maintenance type of budget. That's not an advancement innovation. And so I do try to bring to you what I believe is fiscally responsible, but I want to be clear that this is for next year, especially. I'm really just feeling the need to give our teachers some time with one another so that they can look at that vertical alignment piece and map out the year for our students in a way that allows our kids to continue to make advances. So because they reprioritize, they have to look at mastery and then how each topic is going to be on next year in a way that won't widen some of the gaps that have been created.
Where I was going was, if I don't know how many teachers are being impacted by this, is this the right number? I'm glad you said what you said, because I've said this for many years. We always cut PD. It's the last thing to go as we prioritize, school class size and everything else. And it is penny wise, pound foolish. It clearly is, for all the reasons you guys have articulated. We need you guys to say, this is more important. There's only so much dollars that we're going to be able to spend.
Right.
Where is it? Is it in grade 2? Is it here? Is it 3 other areas? We allocated other money last year for professional development. I haven't seen it yet in the budget, whether we spent it or we didn't spend it, but we'll get to that.
Right.
It's not in this 3,600. There was 3 times that, or 10 times that.
I've presented now in almost all the schools except for Reading. I'm doing that on February 18th. We've talked to the faculty about what high impact instructional strategies look like. And Dr. Platt mentioned it today in his presentation. But having a presentation that's internally driven, kind of like the conversation we're having now, does not actually cost any money. And so we will be doing some things that will be improving practices that are cost neutral. Professional development is 85% effective if it's driven internally. It's only 15% effectively if it comes from the outside. So outside consultants are not the answer, but they are important in certain areas, right? So it's you're far more effective by professional development from the inside. Having said that, then is developing communities of practice, having conversations at faculty meetings, walking around as a leadership team and looking for those really effective practices in the classroom, talking to teachers about how they can amplify those practices. Those are all things that we need to be doing, and we ask people to start to do that.
I just wanted to jump in to say that we can also shift our mindset about the budgeting process. I think we fundamentally start with a number, and the plan is how are we going to whittle this down to a palatable percentage to pass on to the Board of Finance and sort of take it through. And I am more than open to having conversations about increasing numbers and adding staff as the conversations develop. Like this certainly doesn't need to be set in stone. And it's disconcerting to hear that this is just to give to our teachers time. And I mean, you know, Devin certainly had her expertise in this area, and we know if there's consensus amongst us that this number is too low.
Right.
And not necessarily to borrow and steal from some other bucket, but to just fundamentally increase this should be part of what we talk.
I think that's on the table. I think obviously the pressure that we're under is to try to drive it to a lower number. And we all see that pressure, and we know we're going to get that pressure from the Board of Finance. But I don't think that's off the table, and I think we should entertain those conversations here. That's what we're here for. And I think we should entertain that tonight, we should entertain that Thursday. If we have to have a special meeting between now and the end of the month to finalize, then it should always be a part of that. And you know, same thing for kindergarten class. It may be out of our control that we don't know until late May that there was a sudden influx of kindergarten students, and that requires us to fund that extra teacher in that grade. I trust Kim's call on that because she has been right again and again and again and again. So I don't think that's going to happen, but some of these things may be without our ability to keep debate. It's just haven't happened to us. Okay. All right. Before we quick time check, I have 9:52. I'm wondering about how many more slides do we have roughly?
We have maybe 3 or 4 slides left, and we could always put off the Jen's presentation until that's the whole spec. So we have this slide, which is on professional development counseling. There were various consultants. There were various questions about that. We can send you this actually slide rather than talk about it.
I mean, we can do both. I'll leave it to the board. I think Jen's presentation is very important, that we all sort of absorb it, because I think it's an amazing program that Jen brought to us and helped execute here at Helen Keller a few years ago. And now I think there's an opportunity to expand it a little bit. And I think, it's good for the kids in the program. It's good for the schools. It's good for the budget. So it's definitely something we want to make sure that we pay attention to. If we're going to, have fresher ears and eyes for that on Thursday, I'm happy to push that Thursday if that works for everybody else. Yes. Yeah. Is that creating a new reason for you to be here? Were you not planning on being here Thursday? Okay. Okay, good. All right, good. Okay, then maybe we just go through the remaining slides.
Okay, then there's 3 slides left.
Perfect.
So here's the part 2 to the conversation. We have slightly better news in that we did receive some grant funding that allowed us to provide professional learning opportunities for teachers and for administrators. You can see that grant funding information on this slide as well as in more. As you can see over the years.
Will these show off, will these be seen as offsets against the budget that we're going to be working for?
No, because the grant funding that we received are all pandemic specific grants, and I'll explain a little bit more about what aspect of the pandemic that it's addressing that might not be found in its. So specifically, some of the PD had to do with the state's interest in having us focus on acceleration as opposed to remediation. And so we have many administrators involved with a network of districts across the state of Connecticut focused on academic, it's really, I would say, academic revision, but helping us to really focus on learning as opposed to is part of this year and will continue into next year. There's also a fair amount of professional development that has to do with positive climate and re-engaging students, some of the mental health issues that we heard about, as well as a response to the need to provide anti-bullying. So I would say the anti-bullying could be found in any year, but certainly as students are engaging socially with one another and they were away from school for a period of time, our administrators are seeing that this need is pronounced, especially at the school. So as you can see here in the adopted budget versus the proposed, I know there were some specific questions about DEI and climate. So the initial request from last year, the proposal, included $10,000 per site. What was approved was $13,650 altogether for both schools. So quite a reduction for that area. For next year, the request is much less. So we're really looking at that more broadly as climate work. And the request is for $5,000 a school or $10,000 altogether. Other than that, it's pretty much a consistent carryover. We often bring in the same consultants that we've used for years from Teachers College to work with our teachers to help them to better understand the reading and writing units of study. And that's worked with the collaboratively with Reading. So there is some savings there, and then if we bring both the teachers together, then we should. Next year, we need to host a tri-state consortium visit. We put this off for 2 years now. It was supposed to occur in the spring of 2020, not occur. And then in working with Dr. McKinnon, we really felt that this was not the right year to reschedule that visit. So we put that off until next year, but that needs to be funded. Summer Academy. So I'm pleased to offer some good news. I sent out a survey to our Easton teachers, and we're looking forward to being able to run Summer Academy again this summer. There's healthy interest from Staples. It looks like we're going to be able to offer 15 to 20 classes, enrichment classes. And at Helen Keller, while there's less of an interest, there is some interest. So every little bit counts. So we probably have, I would say, 2 to 5 classes that we'll be able to run at Helen Keller. And we also have teachers who are willing to serve as advisors in both locations. So the next step here is that we will post for the advisor positions. Once those are filled, those individuals will work hard to gather the course descriptions, and they will create a brochure, and then the brochure will be sent out to the parents. We really want to get this out much earlier this year. I know that we were very late in the game last year. So the hope is that we can get the ball rolling and get the registration information out to parents very soon. You see the grant offset here. We will help to early. Extracurriculars, we really already talked about this a little bit. You can see the clubs that are currently running. Dr. Platt shared about 100 students each grade participate. The extracurriculars were funded entirely this year by SR2 and ARPA-ESSER, and they are in the office budget. Okay, so there's some difference, as you can see, the cost of running that really is just because of the contractual increase in the teacher segments.
Okay, so this is a presentation that we'll put up until Thursday. Okay, good. And that just brings us to kind of where we are at the moment. We are at 4.3%, so we 4.55 to 4.45 with we've made those changes we talked about, which means that we are currently at 4.3%. The Board of Education view and what you have on the website is actually higher than that, and we are one button away from publishing the new numbers. We just wanted to talk to you about reasons why those adjustments have been made. So for Thursday night, we can come back and talk to you about Junior Bridges program. We can answer any additional questions you have. We could also come up with a proposed list of some other areas, some other additional budget reductions that we could start the meeting with. Would you like us to do that? It's, up to your preference. So,
Yeah, and I think Jenny's point, we should keep in mind that this is not simply a race to the bottom into, a race to get to the lowest number, but it is useful to understand priorities. It is useful to understand if we're at 4.3, where would the administration make cuts if we were trying to get to 4, 3.75, 3.5. I don't know if I'm particularly interested in seeing cuts beyond that because I think it's pretty austere. Because I think, as you stated early on in this presentation, it's already an austere presentation. 98% almost of we're obliged to spend this. We're really blown away on this. And I know cost of living and all that has been going up, so I'm sure that's baked into this bit with the electricity and sort of all of that. But 4.3 is very difficult for us to do. And it's, it would be useful for us to understand when we come to the point of agreeing on what we want to bring to the Board of Finance, the kinds of choices that we're making.
So we'll come back to you on Thursday with some models and some examples of what you just said, 4.3, 4, 3.75, 3.5, and we'll provide some a list of potential reductions that we can start talking about.
And I think when you were talking earlier about, not that this should be for Thursday, I'm just talking about next budget season. It's just the 3 years and just really understanding what the goals are. It would be really helpful in terms of understanding what we may need to spend 1 year and how that offsets for a following year so that we can better project our spending. And I think for the town's planning and just for, I'm sure, administration's planning, it would be a really helpful exercise.
The other pieces of the puzzle that Elizabeth played a part, like health insurance.
Yeah.
Breakage, so that we know for sure if it's even necessary to dig into those proposed lists of reductions to get us from, but how much of that, Randy was talking about. So like what's budgeted for those things?
Right.
Potential breakage, anything else that might contribute besides just let's reduce this by this.
We will talk with Brown and Brown and answer the questions, Randy, that you asked, and factor that into our model, and talk about the level of risk between what you're budgeting now and health insurance and where potentially we could go, what the savings could be to highlight our exact point.
Oh, wait, yeah, right.
You got to put it in an envelope and then hold it to your head.
All right. I think there's 100,000.
Okay, that would be nice. Anything else? Anything, Devin or Jen?
See you Thursday. No, thank you for letting me Zoom in. I appreciate it. And I look forward to being with you guys in person on Thursday night.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for being here with us. All right. If there are no further items in discussion possible action, we'll look for adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Jeff.
Second.
Absent objection, we are adjourned at 10:04 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.